This is Background Nippon. There is nothing here that needs your attention. What follows is Japanese history, told slowly for the end of the day. The lanterns are lit. Landscape. There is a city that was never meant to become what it became. For 250 years, it grew quietly inside a system designed to keep the world out. No foreign ships at its docks, no foreign ideas in its schools, no foreign coins in its markets. Just the slow accumulation of people and streets and lanterns and canal water and the smell of cedar and fish and charcoal. Season after season, until it was one of the largest cities on earth, and almost no one outside Japan knew it existed. It was called Edo. Tonight, we are going to spend the last hours of that city, the years when the world finally arrived, and Edo had to decide what it would become. There is no rush. This is a quiet story. The lanterns are still lit. In 1603, a general named Tokugawa Ieyasu became shogun and chose Edo as his seat of power. It was not an obvious choice. Edo was a small fishing settlement on a wide bay at the eastern end of the main island. Kyoto, to the west, was the imperial capital, ancient, refined, the center of Japanese culture for 8 centuries. But Ieyasu did not want to govern from a place that belonged to everyone's history. He wanted a place that would belong to his. So he built. He drained marshes. He redirected rivers. He brought in laborers from every province to build a castle and then a city around it. Within a generation, the castle was the largest in Japan. Within a century, the city around it held more than 1 million people, making it, by most estimates, the largest city in the world at the time. The people who lived there did not know that. They simply knew their neighborhood, their canal, their bridge. The city was too large to understand all at once. Woodblock. The Tokugawa system that governed Edo and all of Japan was built around a single idea: stability. Every person had a place. Samurai at the top, then farmers, then artisans, then merchants. You were born into your station and stayed there. You could not change your name or your profession or your place of residence without permission. In practice, the city was messier than the rules suggested. Merchants grew rich despite being ranked below farmers. The theatre districts and pleasure quarters developed their own parallel culture, more vibrant in some ways than the official one. The artists who painted the city, Hokusai, Hiroshige, and hundreds of others, recorded a world full of small pleasures. Cherry blossoms, summer festivals, the particular quality of afternoon light on the Sumida River. These were the years of ukiyo, the floating world, a way of living lightly inside a system that did not move, finding what was beautiful and temporary and worth painting before it was gone. What strikes you about the Hiroshige prints of Edo is how much rain there is in them. He painted rain from ferry boats, rain on bridges at night, rain falling sideways across the bay, the city seen through curtains of water, blurred and softened, the lanterns smearing their light across wet streets. Hiroshige died in 1858. He did not live to see what came next. But the rain paintings survive. Hundreds of them. And they have the quality of something preserved under glass. A city so thoroughly itself, so sealed from the outside world, that even its weather seemed to belong only to it. The isolation policy was called Sakoku. Locked country. For 250 years it held. And then, in 1853, 4 black ships appeared in the bay. They called them Kurafune, black ships. The American Commodore, Matthew Perry, arrived in Edo Bay on the 8th of July, 1853, with 4 steam-powered warships. They were iron-hulled and moved without sails, something most people watching from shore had never seen. The smoke from their stacks rose straight into the summer sky. Perry had a letter from President Millard Fillmore. It asked Japan to open its ports to American trade. In diplomatic language, this means, "We are here with weapons, and we would like to begin a relationship." He did not wait for a reply. He delivered the letter, stated that he would return the following year for an answer, and sailed away. What he left behind was a year of paralysis. The Shogunate, which had not faced a serious external challenge in 2 centuries, did not know what to do. The military technology was beyond anything they had. The legal framework, no foreign ships, no foreign contact, was absolute, but clearly unenforceable. There was no good answer, and everyone knew it. Photography. During that year of waiting, something shifted in Edo. Not visibly. The streets still moved the same way. The market stalls opened at the same hour. The temple bells rang at the same intervals. But the conversations in tea houses and government offices had a different quality. People were talking about things that had not been discussed openly for 200 years. What was Japan exactly? Was it the Tokugawa system, which had brought peace but also stagnation? Was it the emperor in Kyoto, who technically ruled but had not actually governed since the 12th century? Was it the samurai class, whose military training had not been tested in a real war since the early 1600s? These were not comfortable questions. They were the kind of questions a country only asks when it has to. Perry returned in February 1854 with 8 ships. The Convention of Kanagawa was signed. 2 ports were opened. The locked country was unlocked. The Shogunate would not survive another 15 years. Tensions. The period that followed the opening of Japan is called the Bakumatsu, the end of the Tokugawa order. It lasted roughly 15 years and was violent in ways that are difficult to reconcile with the image of Edo as a city of lanterns and woodblock prints. Foreigners who had settled in the new treaty ports were occasionally attacked. Samurai from the western domains, Satsuma, Choshu, who had opposed the shogunate's concessions, traveled to Edo to make their opposition known in other ways. Assassinations, street fights at night, bodies found in canals. The shogunate tried to reassert control and found it could not. The Western powers, whose presence had caused all of this, continued to press for more rights, more access, more trade. Edo itself remained largely intact through this period. It was the countryside and the western domains where the fighting concentrated. But the city knew what was happening. Rumor traveled fast along its canals. The price of rice fluctuated with every piece of political news. People lit their lanterns and waited to see what would come. Historical. In 1866, Tokugawa Yoshinobu became the 15th shogun. He was 30 years old, educated, capable, and had been privately skeptical of the shogunate's path for years. He understood what was happening. He had read enough Western political theory, translated and circulated quietly in scholarly circles, to know how these situations tended to resolve. He did not want the position. He accepted it anyway, because someone had to. His tenure lasted 14 months. In November 1867, Yoshinobu formally returned the title of shogun to the emperor, an act that had no real precedent in Japanese history. The Tokugawa had governed for 264 years. He handed it back on a piece of paper in a meeting room without ceremony. The people who recorded his expression that day disagreed about what it showed. Some said resignation, some said relief. He lived until 1913, long enough to see automobiles in the streets of what had been Edo. He died at 76 in a Japan that bore almost no resemblance to the one he had been born into. The formal transfer of power came in January 1868. The Emperor Meiji was 15 years old. The movement that put him on the throne, the Meiji Restoration, was led by young samurai from the western domains who had spent years maneuvering against the shogunate. They were not traditionalists. They wanted to modernize Japan so that it could not be dominated by Western powers. Their logic was, to beat them, we must become like them in the ways that matter. This meant building a navy. It meant sending students abroad. It meant adopting Western legal codes and Western-style industries and Western forms of dress for government officials. It meant, eventually, a constitution and a parliament. It also meant a new capital. The emperor moved his court from Kyoto to Edo. The city was renamed Tokyo, Eastern Capital. The renaming happened quietly, as many of the most significant things do. An announcement was made. The old name appeared in the records one final time, and then did not appear again. Former Edo. What changed immediately in the city was visible in specific ways. The samurai class was dissolved. Not all at once. It happened gradually, through a series of decrees that first restricted, then abolished the right to carry swords, then eliminated the stipends that had supported samurai families for generations. Men whose fathers and grandfathers had defined themselves entirely by their status as warriors had to find something else to do. Many became bureaucrats, which is its own kind of transformation. Some opened schools. Some struggled badly. The castle district was converted. Foreign advisors arrived. German engineers, French legal scholars, British naval officers, and took up residence in parts of the city that had been closed to outsiders for 2.5 centuries. Telegraph lines went up along the main roads. They were the first thing built in the Western style that everyone could see from the street. Those thin wires between wooden poles, stretching toward the horizon, carrying messages at speeds that had no equivalent in anything Edo had known. The old city did not disappear. It was built over. Slowly. The canals remained. The street grid in many neighborhoods remained. The temple bells still rang. But Edo was gone. Western clothing. The Japanese word for the old ways is furui, old. It does not carry the weight that the English word does. It is not automatically nostalgic, not automatically a criticism. In the Meiji years, furui and atarashi, old and new, sat next to each other in the streets of Tokyo in ways that photographers found endlessly interesting. A man in a Western suit waiting for a rickshaw. A Shinto shrine surrounded by telegraph poles. Women in kimono walking past a Western-style brick building that housed a new bank. The images are sometimes read as evidence of confusion, of a culture in crisis. But the people in them do not look confused. They look like people going about their day in a city that is changing, which is what cities do. What was kept in this period tended to be the things that had been most private. The tea ceremony, which had always been conducted indoors, away from public view. The Noach theatre, which was slow and interior, and did not photograph well. The arts of calligraphy and lacquerwork and ceramic glazing, which were practiced in studios and workshops, and passed between teacher and student with very little fanfare. These things were not performed. They were simply continued. Lanterns. There is a photograph from the 1890s of the Sumida River at night. Hiroshige had painted this same view 40 years earlier. The river, the curve of the far bank, the lanterns reflected in the water. In the photograph, the lanterns are still there. The river curves in the same direction. A wooden bridge crosses at the same approximate angle. But at the right edge of the frame, just barely visible, is the iron framework of a new bridge being built. The old one will come down when the new one is finished. The man who took the photograph may not have thought about Hiroshige when he chose his angle, but he chose the same angle. You find this often in early Japanese photography, an unconscious continuity with the woodblock tradition, the eye trained on the same views, the same quality of light on water, the same preference for distance over proximity. Edo was gone, but something of the way Edo had looked at itself persisted in what people chose to photograph, in what they thought was worth looking at. Some things do not need to be decided to be preserved. They simply continue, carried forward in the way people see. Aftermath. Photograph. On the 1st of September, 1923, at 2 minutes before noon, the ground moved. The Great Kanto earthquake lasted approximately 4 minutes. Its magnitude has been estimated at 7.9. It struck at the worst possible time, midday, when charcoal and gas stoves were lit across the city for the cooking of lunch. The fires that followed burned for 2 days. More than 100,000 people died. Entire neighborhoods that had survived the transformation from Edo to Tokyo, the old merchant quarters, the craftsmen's districts, the places where the streets still followed Hiroshige's maps, were gone. The low-lying areas along the rivers where the densest old construction had stood, burned completely. The city was rebuilt quickly, in the 1920s and 30s, in a more modern style. Wider streets, more concrete. The character of the reconstructed neighborhoods was different from what had been there before. Then, in 1945, it burned again. What Tokyo is today was built mostly after 1945. The city that Hiroshige painted, the city of canals and wooden bridges and neighborhood shrines, exists now almost entirely in the images he and his contemporaries left behind. Traditional, in the Asakusa district of Tokyo, not far from the Sumida River, there is a temple that has stood in various forms since the 7th century. Sensoji, the oldest temple in Tokyo. It was heavily damaged in the 1945 firebombing and rebuilt in 1958. The main gate, the Kaminarimon, the Thunder Gate, was reconstructed in 1960, funded by a donation from a local businessman. The great paper lantern hanging in its center has been replaced several times. The current one weighs 700 kilograms. On any given evening, the approach to the temple is full of people. Some are tourists. Some are locals who have been coming since childhood. Some are there for specific prayers. Some simply walk the lantern-lit path because it is one of the most reliably beautiful things in the city. They are not walking through Edo. Edo is gone. But they are walking towards something that has been in this place for a very long time, and that has survived in one form or another. Most of what history could arrange to throw at it.